Okay, shall we start?
Yes, please.
Yes. Very good evening to all the participants and respected teachers are also there. So here today we are not going to give you lecture, but just I will share my experience and information with you. So today we are going to start for the basics of wildlife handling and their treatment for field veterinarians. So in this topic, we will briefly discuss about what is the significance of wildlife. Should we treat the wild animals or we should not treat the wild animals? Then what are the zoo animal health challenges in India and management of respiratory diseases in reptiles? So we will briefly look at these topics. So what is the significance of wildlife in India? Now if you are seeing the message, that is the game of word, how message is passed currently. Is the wildlife a threat or at threat? It's very big question actually. But if you are looking into the current scenario of the population, human population is growing like anything, and wild animal they are decreasing because of our so-called as development and rapid urbanization and destruction of habitat, or there is a severe loss of habitat and forest that leads to the decrease in the wild animal population. If you consider the scenario of 1917 and 2017, if you compare, you can understand the things which are going in current area. So under the name of development, we are destroying the forest and environment. But we should not forget that development and environment goes hand in hand. So without considering the environment, there should not be the development. So this picture says lot about this current situation. If you want to save the wild animal and if you want to save ourselves, we have to save the wild animals, because this is the part of ecosystem, and in ecosystem presence of wild animal, that is the sign of good sign of the environment and ecosystem. So if the one animal, to save one animal, we have to save the forest. What that I will explain in next slide, because this is the part of ecosystem. All living creature which are inhabitant on this land, they are part of ecosystem, and we should not disturb this ecosystem, because that is the balance between productivity and use and disturbance. So try to maintain the balance in ecosystem. See, if you save one tiger is to save the many habitats, because presence of tiger in the environment, that is the good sign of the good health of this environment and forest. So to save one tiger, we have to save many herbivores. To save many herbivores, we have to save many large amount of the forest and land. So indirectly, we are saving the ecosystem and environment. So to save one tiger is to save many habitats. Now question, basic question, whether we should treat the wild animals or we should not treat wild animals. If you think in wild condition, in nature is sufficient to take care of the all wild animals. So need not to disturb them and need not to be treated, but unless and until there is an intervention by the humans. But those animals which are kept in captivity or under zoo, they are totally dependent upon the human for their feeding and everything. So obviously that is our responsibility to treat them in captivity and zoo. But in most of cases, in wild animal or in free range condition, we should not bother about the wild animal. Just try to maintain the environmental balance, and if unless and until there is a human intervention and ethical consideration, we should not disturb the animals. So basic thumb rule is that do no harm, at least. So what are the zoo animal health challenges in India? If you are seeing the condition in wild animal, there is lack of skilled manpower. Yeah, this screen is visible to you all perfectly.
Okay. Yes, doctor.
So lack of skilled manpower. Countries like developing countries like India, we don't have skilled manpower. And whatever we are treating or whatever manpower we have, they are based on their experience and empirical treatment. So there is no formal training, specialized course is not there. So now they have started the courses and formal trainings also, but still we don't have sufficient skilled manpower to treat the animals in wildlife. So even though I cannot say I am the expert in wildlife, because this wildlife is an ocean. Many mammals, many reptiles, many birds with variation in the anatomy and physiology. That is the really challenging task to the treat, and that's why we cannot say we are expert in that. More better way we can say I am specialized, and whatever the, because this is very vast field, so we have so many restrictions. So term specialized person can be more correct than the expert. Then limited information on the standard therapeutic and prophylactic measures. Nowadays, whatever we are treating, that is based on the foreign reports and references and literature, and based on our experience, those who are working in the zoos. So that is very limited, and yet we have to standardize the most of things in our Indian condition. Then emerging diseases. The wildlife, most of the times, 60 to 75% diseases, they have been transported from human and animals, and wildlife, they are considered as one of the major reservoir for the many diseases, so that may lead to the emerging of new diseases. Then managemental issues are there, and this in wildlife, while working in the wildlife, there is always media and administrative pressure always will be there, and diagnostic uncertainty. In wildlife, when we are working with wildlife, there is always, we cannot assure the diagnosis, because if you see this picture, and by seeing this picture, we cannot say whether they are diseased or healthy animals, because of diagnostic uncertainty. Not all animals, not all diseases show signs and symptoms at all times. There is a one basic thumb rule in wild animals. Until the day they not reveal their weakness or sign of illness, because they know if they are showing the weakness or sign of illness, the predators, they will attack on them. Predators are also very clever. They will not waste their energy to kill the healthy prey, because they have to also safeguard themselves. So until the death or until the last resort, they will not show their weakness. That is a thumb rule in wild. So whether that animal is having disease or not, by observing physically, we cannot say. And whenever we find the symptom, that time that case is already become more severe. So that is the main crux in the diagnosis of the wild disease conditions. So that is the ability of mask the clinical signs. Even if you are observing any bird, and if that bird knows that someone is observing, immediately that will act as a healthy or normal. So that is the thing that happens in the wild animal. So handling of wild animal cases. So what are the challenges faced by the field veterinarian? First thing is that we don't know what kind of animal it is. We don't know the species. And then next step, if you know or if you don't know the species, you don't know how to approach that animal. Then what is the behavior of that animal? Before approaching the animal, we should know the behavior. That is the main thing in wildlife. Then what about injection? How to give, where to give, and how much to give? These are the questions commonly faced by the veterinarian. This is due to it doesn't mean that wildlife veterinarian or any veterinarian cannot manage cannot handle the cases. He can handle the cases, but due to no information or lack of formal trainings, we don't have much confidence. So anatomical and physiological differences. While treating the wild animals, there is that similar things happens in all kind of wild animals. So that is the bigger challenge for the veterinarian to study all these things. So administration of the medicaments in the wild animals. Suppose any rhinoceros is there, tiger is there, or any reptile is there. Where to give injection, how to collect blood, that is also, we don't know most things about that. So in case of rhino, we can use the air vein for IV, and for IM injection you can use the thigh. So in case of bear, what is the specialty of the bear? Bear have very thick skin, not thick skin but thick fat layer. So whenever we give the injection, we have to think the size of needle. That needs more than 1.5 to 3 inches needle is required, and then avoid the. There are chances to inject the medicaments in the fat layer, so that may cause the re-narcotization. Sometimes if you are injecting any anesthetic, there will be chances of re-narcotization. Then what is the ideal site for the blood collection in bear? Ideal site is the lingual vein. You might be thinking that how to collect the lingual vein, how to approach for that lingual. See, animal comes to us when it is having more severe condition. At that time, if it is possible, if the animal is severe or in recombinant condition, that time you can take out the tongue, then press at the base of the tongue, then that vein will be raised, and then we can collect the blood. Again, if the animal is lean, not having more fat, then you can shave the area of the jugular vein, and then you can raise and collect the blood. Like that, you can use medial saphenous or cephalic vein also in case of bear, based on the situation and condition of the bear. What about the elephant? Elephant is the very largest mammal on the land. If you think the muscle and thin skin thickness of the elephant, more thicker skin is present on the hind leg, and more thinner skin will be present on the forelimb. So whenever you are giving injection in forelimb, we can give with our normal needle also. But when you are giving injection to the hind quarter, we have to use longer needle. Again, one more thing we have to take care that these animals are prone for the abscess formation. So whenever giving any kind of injection, we should not inject more than 40 ml at one side, and that side should be cleaned properly to avoid the abscess formation. Then IV and subcut. See, where we have to give IV is posterior of the ear. That is the clear cut. We can visible, we can appreciate the veins at the posterior of the ear. See, that ear will continuously having the movement. That is the one kind of thermoregulation. So heat can be, temperature can be regulated by movement of the ear. So while giving the IV, we have to constantly monitor the ear, and so that is always disturbance due to continuous movement of the ear. What about subcutaneous? Where you will give the subcutaneous injection in elephant? Basic thumb rule of the giving subcutaneous injection is wherever there is a loose skin, we can give the subcutaneous fluid. So in elephant, at the base of ear, we can find some loose skin. At the base of tail, anal flap, there is a loose skin, we can give subcutaneous fluid. Then what are the factors which affect the medication in the elephant? First thing is the personality and training of the elephant. If the elephant is wild, he will not obey you and he will not cooperate you. So, and if the elephant is trained or captive elephant, we can get some more assistance or cooperation from that elephant. Then handler's confidence and skill. While approaching any kind of animal in veterinary practice, first thing, veterinarians should have confidence. Even if you are approaching for the dog, and if your confidence is very well judged by the dog, if you are looking confidently in his eyes, he will obey you. Otherwise, he will start barking at you. So handler's confidence is most important along with the skill. Then available restraint facilities. Most of times these facilities are not available properly. So we have to always, there is a risk. Then African elephant compared to the Asian elephants are more cooperative than the African elephants. Then don't underestimate. See this picture. There is always risk. While treating the elephant, always consider his weight. He is more than 6 to 10 ton. Like that, the weight is there. And knowingly or unknowingly, simply he can crush your legs. You can imagine. And while he will not stand quietly, always he will move here and there like to and fro or sideways. Like that, they will do the movement. So for that, we need some expertise level and experience. So therefore, that need extra expert team for handler. And unless and until we don't have a perfect handler, we should not approach the treatment for elephant. Then ethical consideration. We have to always consider the staff working with us while treating any kind of wild animals, because that is our legal responsibility. That is the teamwork. We should not save ourselves first. We have to save all our team. So that thing always we have to consider while performing any operation in the wild animals. And one more thing is that never believe in wild animals. Never take any risk. Most of times we are getting experience in domestic also. There is no chance. चुकीला माफी नाही, बरोबर आहे का? So in wild animal, always we are little bit more careful, but in case of domestic, we are little bit casual and we get the lesson. So never believe in wild animals, always take precautions. Then reptile medication is very challenging and surprising, that where to give injection, how to give injection, at what site we have to give injection. So in reptile, while giving injection, where are the muscles we have to find? See, reptiles, they don't have diaphragm, or they don't have a sternum. They have just simple vertebral column. Transfer processes are long, and above that transfer processes, there is a muscle that is called as abaxial muscles, where we can give the injection, and you can give the subcutaneous injection also. Now, question is that where to give the injection? Anterior half of the body, or posterior half of the body, or anywhere in the body? See, in reptiles, there is a renal portal system. Renal portal system means what it is actually. If you are giving injection at the posterior half of the body, so that drug may be excreted through the kidney before reaching to the systemic circulation. That's why we have to consider this renal portal system. And most of times, some literature says that safely we can give the injection at any place or anywhere in the body. In case of snakes or reptiles, some literature says that you can give the injection in anterior half of the body, but that is based on the pharmacokinetics and dynamics of the particular drug. If you are knowing the pharmacokinetics and dynamics of the particular drug, from where it is excreted, accordingly you can give the injection. But if you don't know the pharmacokinetics and dynamics, better way, separately you can give the injection in the anterior half of the body. Then management of respiratory diseases in reptiles. So we don't have more patient wildlife, these reptiles. These are commonly presented to our clinics in as a pet, and most of times we blink while treating these cases. So what is the basic thing? Even though there are some reptiles which are extensively bred in the captivity, but we should not forget that. Always remember, thousands of years of evolution cannot be erased by the few generations in the captivity. So while treating these things, always we have to little bit precautious. We have to take some care. So these respiratory diseases, these are more common, and these reptiles, when come to our clinic, that is most frustrating animal to be treated successfully. There is a reason, because they have very varied anatomical and physiological adaptation. So whatever the things, what we can do, first thing is any patient with respiratory problem, temperature and humidity, because most of times any more non-infectious respiratory diseases are due to change in the environmental temperature and humidity. Then diet. Most of times we don't know how to provide the diet, and how to provide, how much quantity and what quantity, balanced or imbalanced. We don't know much about the nutrition, and that is one of the cause for causing the diseases, because on the immune system and epithelium of the skin and mucous membrane. So their deficiency may cause the disease. Then hygiene. Most of times managemental diseases are there, opportunistic pathogens are there, mostly gram-negative, Enterobacteriaceae family, they are more prevalent in the reptilian species. So these three things we have to always consider once the patient comes to us. Then clinical signs. Clinical signs, I told you already that they will not show the symptoms initially unless it is critical condition. swimming. If any turtle is swimming in only one side, that indicates that there is a problem in the lung, or there may be the pathogenic lesions in the involving lungs, and that is the problem of buoyancy that we can consider. Then whistling to gasping noises. Sometimes there you can hear the mild whistling and open mouth breathing and severe dyspnea, nasal discharge and posture. Sometimes nasal discharge that can be considered as upper respiratory tract infection, but there might be chance of involving that infection involving lungs also. Then posture, any kind of animal, reptile suffering from the respiratory tract disease, if it is severe, there will be typical posture of elevated head and elongated neck. So that typical posture we can get that animal is suffering from respiratory tract infection. Then thorough clinical examination. We have to examine the animal very thoroughly, that internal nares, external nares, pharynx, gullet, glottis, and external skin or any observable lesions, that we have to thoroughly examine. In reptiles, we can auscultate also, but not that effect is not like the mammals, but we can appreciate auscultation in reptiles also. We can put some wet cloth on this